unto Yah, his glory I sing. Yah bless.
Bless Yah, all my soul. Bless Yah, all his angels. Bless Yah, all his hosts. Bless Yah, all his works.
Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Singing praises to your holy name. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Singing praises to your holy name. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Singing praises to your holy name. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Bless Yahweh, oh my soul. Singing praises to your holy name. Hallelujah. YISraEL. Kodesh. Yeah. Yahweh is holy. Kodesh. Yeah. Yahweh is holy. Kodesh. Yeah. Yahweh is holy. Kodesh. Yeah. He's holy. He's holy. Yahweh, my Elohim. He's holy, holy, holy. Great and he terrible, magnify Yah, the only Kodesh, Baruch Yah, hallelujah, YISraEL. I love praising my Yah, El Elyon, he's YAH'S the most high, no other than Yahweh Elohim, the only one, no faker. Yahweh, Zeba'oth, his garments are light cloak. Yahweh Elohim, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Commandments on my hand be a Zikron, the glory Yahweh shine on. The fourth he put his time on. It's time to get my tribe on. Shema YISraEL, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. It's only him, I thought you knew. 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 Kodesh, Yah. Yahweh is holy. Kodesh, yeah. He's holy, he's holy. Kodesh, yeah. Yahweh is holy. Kodesh, yeah. He's holy, he's holy. Yahweh, my Elohim, he's holy, holy, holy. Great and he terrible, magnify Yah. Baruch Yah, hallelujah, YISraEL. I love praising my Yah, El Elyon, he YAH'S the most high, no other than Yahweh Elohim, the only one, no faker. Yahweh, Zeba'oth, his garments in a light cloak. Yahweh, Elohim, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Commandments on my hand be a Zikron, the Yahweh shine on. Before he put his time on, it's time to get my tribe on. Shema YISraEL, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. It's only him, I thought you knew. 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 Kodesh, Yah, Yahweh so holy. Kodesh, holy. Kodesh, Yahweh so holy. Hallelujah. Praise the mighty, 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 mighty Yah. Praise the 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 mighty, mighty Yah. Kodesh, praise Yah. Yahweh is holy. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yahweh so holy. Kodesh, Yah. Yahweh so holy. Kodesh, Yah. Yahweh is holy.
Shalom, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, giving all praise and honor to the Holy One of Israel, to the Creator of the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that is therein is, by saying hallelujah. Praise the mighty Yah. Yah is righteous, Yah is holy, and let Yahweh be magnified. Once again, the Creator has allowed us to come before you another day, another night, bringing to you his great, holy, and exalted words, even the words of truth. My name is Mowreh IshYAH YIsraEL of the House of Israel, located right here in Cincinnati, Ohio, 1907 Vine Street, bringing to you nothing but the truth. And yes, it is true. All we're going to do is tell you the truth. For Yah ordained me to tell you the truth, and this is what I'm going to do. And who is this Yah? Yah is the creator of the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that is therein is. Yah is the Elohim of our fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, Yitzhak, and YIsraEL, whom you may know as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yah is our king. He's our judge. He's our lawgiver. And not just our lawgiver, Yahweh is our only Savior, and not just of Israel. Yahweh is the Savior of the world. And once again, I praise the mighty Yah for allowing us to come once again to you, bringing to you his great, holy, and exalted words, which is only written in the Holy Scriptures, or what you know of as the Old Testament, from Genesis to Malachi. Tonight, and not just tonight, this week, we're going to be answering the many questions that our people have. And it's our understanding that our people do have a lot of questions. Some people are very sincere in seeking Yahweh, seeking answers from Yahweh. And Yahweh has provided his servants in the earth to answer the many questions that you will have of Yah. And we're here to do just that. And we have somebody on the board that will get your questions, let us know, and we will address them. I know you just now hear me say it, so you might not have questions at this moment, or you may have some later on in our program. But we're going to be answering questions mainly through the rest of the week. That way, we can address as many questions as necessary. So before I get the questions from our people, a couple things I do want to share with you and point out. And one of those things is a question that I was asked on the Sabbath day that I just want to explore a little bit more with our people. And the questions were concerning when a woman become a woman and a man become a man. And these are very relevant questions, very relevant to the laws of the Most High. Because Yahweh has laws, commandments, statutes, and judgments that we must adhere to. And we have to know the law and understand the law to teach the law. A lot of people say they want to hear the law. They want to know the law. And they want to see the answers concerning the law. Well, then as soon as you start taking them to the law, then this is where things get a little bit hairy. Even though they say they want to hear the law, but then because they don't understand the law and not familiar with the law, many of the things that I might teach, you don't understand it because you're not familiar with the law. So, for example, just want to just give you some examples so you can understand what I'm saying. In the book of Deuteronomy 18, let's start there. Now, according to the scriptures, Moses wrote the book of the law. And the book of the law that Moses wrote, and you can see Moses' handprint in these books, is from Genesis to Deuteronomy. One of the reasons why we don't go by these other books, such as the book of Jasher, the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilees, one of the reasons in the Quran and other books, New Testament, because a lot of these books contradict the very thing that Yahweh told Moses. Or they will give you a version that Moses never spoke about. But Yahweh said about Moses, and we're going to read what Yahweh said about Moses. But these other books, Yahweh never told to anybody at all to tell them anything about his law. But he did speak to Moses. And where did Moses record these writings? He recorded these writings in the law, or what we know of as the law of Moses or the book of the law. This is one of the laws in the book of the law. According to the book of Deuteronomy, the 18th chapter, the 15th verse, and this is what it says. And Yahweh your Elohim will raise up to you a prophet from the midst of you, of your brethren, like unto me. In other words, this is what Moses saying. He's saying there's going to be a prophet that's going to come up from your midst of one of your brethren, just like me. Unto him you shall hearken, according to all that you desire of Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb, in the day of assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my Elohim, neither let me see this great fire any more, that I die not. And Yahweh said to me, when you said these things, they have well spoken that which they have spoken. And let's analyze this. So when the people had an opportunity to get the word of Yahweh straight from Yahweh, as they did on Mount Sinai, as they did when Yahweh spoke his commandments out of heaven, and they seen that great fire, they made it crystal clear to Moses that we do not want to hear the voice of Yahweh. Least we die. And so Yahweh said, okay, that's fine. That's okay. That's cool. That's well. You don't have to hear my voice. That's okay. I don't have no problem with that. A lot of things our people want, Yahweh do have a problem with. But this thing right here, Yahweh said, well, I don't have no problem with this. This is okay. This is cool. So this what Yahweh commanded that he would do. This is the law that Yahweh instituted as a result of what the children of Israel asked. And this is what it says. I will raise him up a prophet. And what is a prophet? A prophet is a messenger, someone who brings you a message from Yahweh, from among their brethren, like unto you. In other words, it's going to be one of your family members, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall come to pass, watch what this law says, that whoever will not listen to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. In other words, if someone comes speaking in the name of Yahweh, it is your obligation by law to listen. By law. Watch what it says. 20th verse. But the prophet which shall presume to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or that shall speak in the name of other deities, other gods, even that prophet shall die. In other words, so in order for us to know whether Yahweh spoke this thing or not, we have to know the word of Yahweh. And then we also must know the true and certified and bona fide messenger of Yahweh that Yahweh sent to speak in his name. We got to know this in order for us to adhere to this law. 21st verse. And if you shall say in your heart, not even out loud, you just said this in your heart, how shall we know the word which Yahweh has not spoken? How are we going to know how to discern between whether Yahweh said this or not? Because the bottom line is not about the man at all. It's on how to divide this word, whether Yahweh spoke this thing or not, whether this is law or not, whether this is the word of Yahweh or not. This is where we got to concern ourselves with. 22nd verse. When a prophet speaks in the name of Yahweh, if the thing follows not, nor come to pass, that is the thing which Yahweh has not spoken, but the prophet has spoken it presumptuously, you shall not be afraid of him. In other words, don't pay him no mind, because undoubtedly what he's speaking is nothing that Yahweh said anyway. But what if Yahweh did say it? Then Yahweh is going to require that thing of you. And there's a lot of people saying a lot of things that Yahweh didn't say. And we're going to show you these things. But right now, I'm going to see if we have any questions. One of the questions that was just asked of me, and the question that was asked is, why don't we keep Sukkot? Sukkot is the Hebrew word for tabernacle or booth. According to the scriptures, one of our holy days, one of the last holy days of the year, is the Feast of Tabernacles. And the question is asked, well, why don't we keep the Feast of Tabernacles? Well, according to the book, I'll show you a couple scriptures. One is in the book of Deuteronomy 16. And I like getting right to the point when people answer questions. That way I can answer as many questions as I can. Deuteronomy 16:16. Now watch what it says. 3 times in a year shall all your males appear before Yahweh your Elohim in a place which he shall choose. And where did Yahweh choose to place his name? That shouldn't even be a question at this point. Well, where Yahweh chose to place his name is a place called Jerusalem. It's the only place in the land that bear the name of Yahweh. This is where Yahweh put his temple. This is where Yahweh places priests. This is where Yahweh places altar for sacrifices. This is where Yahweh placed the Ark of the Covenant. And this is the place where he chose to place his name. And where's this place? Because 3 times in a year, all our males had to appear before Yahweh in this place. The first feast day, it says, in the feast of unleavened bread. The second one, it says, and in the feast of weeks. And the third one, it says, and in the feast of tabernacles. And they shall not appear before Yahweh empty. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of Yahweh, your Elohim, which he has given you. And somebody may ask, well, brother Mowreh IshYAH, don't you keep the feast of unleavened bread? And the answer is no. But we do adhere to certain statutes in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the 2 statutes we adhere to is that we remove all the leaven from our houses. And why? Because that ain't something you did in Jerusalem. You did that well before you went to Jerusalem. You removed the leaven from your houses. You did that where you live. The other statute we adhere to is to eat unleavened bread for 7 days. And I'll show you why in this same Deuteronomy 16. This is what it says. In Deuteronomy 16, the 3rd verse. It says, you shall eat no leavened bread with it. Talking about the Passover. But then it goes right into 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread therewith. Even the bread of affliction. And why, Yahweh? For you came forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that you may remember the day when you came forth out of the land of Egypt, all the days of your life. And so this is why we eat unleavened bread and remove the leaven from our houses. We don't try to remove it from the city or from our coast or from anything else, just from our houses. And we eat unleavened bread. But that's why we don't adhere to the Feast of Tabernacles. We recognize the Feast of Tabernacles. Let me say that. We do recognize it. But we don't dwell in booths because this had to be done in Jerusalem. And let me show you that in the book of Leviticus, the 19th chapter. Or not 19, but Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. Just want you to see that. The law, because we're talking about the law. And I'm going to show you that if you do not adhere to any other prophets, you're not keeping the law. And if you somehow make the prophets secondary to the law, then you obviously don't know the law. Because what in the world do you think the prophets is bringing? They're bringing the word of Yahweh, which Yahweh said by law, he's going to require what they say. Why? Because they have his word. In the book of Leviticus 23, and then I'll go to the next question. In the book of Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, and we're going to start reading at the 33rd verse. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of this 7th month shall be the feast of tabernacles for 7 days unto Yahweh. The first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. And on the 8th day shall be a holy convocation unto you. And you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. It is a solemn assembly, and you shall do no servile work therein. These are the feasts of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh, a burnt offering or a meal offering, a sacrifice or drink offerings, everything upon his day. Because this was for 7 days. Besides the Sabbaths of Yahweh, besides your gifts, beside all your vows, beside all your freewill offerings which you give unto Yahweh. And watch this. Also on the 15th day of the 7th month, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, and we ain't gathered in no fruit of no land, but when you have done this, you shall keep a feast unto Yahweh 7 days. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. And watch what else it says. After you get your fruit and bring it in. And you shall take you on the first day the boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, boughs of thick trees, willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before Yahweh, your Elohim, 7 days. And where did you do that? In the place where he chose. You don't just make up the place your own self. You got to do it where he chose. And you shall keep it a feast unto Yahweh 7 days in a year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. And you shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelite born shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh your Elohim. And Moshe declared to the children of Israel the feast of Yahweh. And again, the feast of tabernacle, we were commanded to do it in a place that he chose. And that's all over the scriptures. The next question, and I'll show you a couple more scriptures on that as we continue to answer questions. All right, the question was asked. There's many laws that of Yahweh that interfere with our captors, the governments that Yahweh has placed us under as captives. And when these conflicts happen in terms of the laws of Yahweh and the government, such as like plural marriages. So, for example, according to U.S. government, it wasn't always like this. But according to U.S. government, It is illegal for a man to be married to more than one wife in terms of legal status. In other words, you can't have two legal wives. That is against the U.S. government in particular. And I think it's illegal in all 50 states. There were states that the government allowed it, but I think even today it is illegal in all 50 states. I could be wrong about that. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that is the case. But what is not illegal in all 50 states, as a matter of fact, it is legal in all 50 states, that you are able to practice your own faith and beliefs. You just have to state that this is your faith and belief. This is your religious practice. And so you can't go down to the government and ask them to marry you, as many of our people do. And our people believe that's the only way you can get married. And that's the only way Yahweh will recognize your marriage. And that is not true whatsoever at all. Our people just been brainwashed to believe that is the only way. And in truth, prior to a certain year, nobody went to the government to get married. Most of the people in America, before a certain time, only got married by their religious institution. It's just the government began to take over those practices. They didn't stop people from getting married from their own religious institutions, but they said, if you want your marriage to be recognized by the government by a certain date, then you had to do it. You had to certify your marriage there. And they did this with a lot of practices, not just marriages. Now, mind you, they did this even though they have in the Constitution of America that there's a separation between church and state. And if there's a separation between church and state, then why would the government take over what historically the church was doing, the religious institutions was doing? The religious institutions were the ones who circumcised the children. But then the government took it over and had doctors do it. And you had to be licensed to circumcise your children. Now, that don't mean your religious institutions can't circumcise your children. However, legally, doctors had to be certified to do so, where this practice was not the case before. And so there's many situations like this. But let me show you the law in which Yahweh let us know when there's a conflict, then who do you go by? Well, you always go by Yahweh. In the case of plural marriages, unless Yahweh and saying this is what you're supposed to do, in some cases he have, then it's your choice whether you want to go by Yahweh or the government. For example, in the book of Genesis, I want you to see this. And then we get to the next question. In the book of Genesis, (29), and this is what it says. We'll start at the 13th verse so you can understand this. And it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings and Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him the space of a month. And Laban said to Jacob, because you are my brother, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? What is your pay? What can I pay you, man? Even though they was family members, Jacob still come from a different house. Jacob still had different practices because they come from a different house. And watch what it says. And Laban said to Jacob, 16th verse, and Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah was tender-eyed. But Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. It don't say how old they are. It don't say they was 14 and 12 and 10 or any age that many of our brothers want to make these women some children. It don't say that whatsoever. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had for her. And Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah's daughter, brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave to his daughter Leah Zilpah's maid for a handmaid. And it came to pass in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Did not I serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? And Laban said, it must not be so done in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn. We don't do that here. And undoubtedly Jacob didn't know that, because he was in somebody else's land. He wasn't in his own land. And so he didn't know the customs of that land. 27th verse. Fulfill her week, and we will give you this also for the service which you shall serve with me yet 7 other years. And Jacob did so. He didn't have to. He could have called it quits, but he did so. Fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. And of course, he served for 7 more years. Now, this was not Jacob's mission, nor was his desire to have plural marriages. And then both his wife, Rachel, as well as Leah, also gave their handmaids Jacob wasn't interested in their handmaids. But in all, he ended up with 4 wives. And these 4 wives produce what we know of as today as the 12 tribes of Israel. Was this some accident? Was this some type of mishap? No. Was it because he just didn't know the customs of the land? No, Yahweh was behind all this. Yahweh wanted him to have 12 sons, and this who he wanted Jacob to have the 12 sons with. He could have 1 wife and 12 sons with that wife. But this is what Yahweh wanted. And so, oftentimes, we don't know the divine intervention of Yahweh. We don't know the way of Yahweh. But Yahweh make it crystal clear to us. His ways are not our ways, nor is his thoughts our thoughts. And all through the scriptures, whether it's Joseph in Egypt, his customs were very different than the Egyptians. And the ones that were in conflict, he kept his own customs irregardless of what the Egyptians said or thought. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Azariah, according to Babylon, they had to bow and worship the golden image. But they refused. Why? Because it was in conflict with Yahweh laws. Daniel prayed 3 times a day. And they said, all they said, they instituted a law that you can't pray to nobody for 30 days. And Daniel was like, man, I'm not about to do that. I don't care what government I'm under. I'm going to pray to Yahweh every day. And not only am I going to pray to Yahweh every day, I'm going to pray to Yahweh 3 times a day. And that's what Daniel did. But as a result, he was thrown in the lion's den. But in all these cases, these men prevailed because they made Yahweh their fear and Yahweh their dread. Hallelujah. Another question is, someone said, well, I've been married by the state for 38 years. How do I know that Yahweh recognized my marriage? The state married me. Well, in the scriptures, and we'll go to in Genesis 41. This is how I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Yahweh recognized your marriage. He knew where you got married at. He knew who you said your covenant with. In the book of Genesis 41, this is what it says in verse 44. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without you shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zanapaniah, and he gave him to wife Asina, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. And of course, Joseph had 2 sons in Egypt. One of his sons, his eldest son, was Manasseh. His second son was Ephraim. that he had in Egypt by an Egyptian wife. And did Yahweh recognize it? Yes, he did. He recognized it to the extent that Joseph's sons even have part of our inheritance. Part of our inheritance. So yes, Yahweh does recognize it. Excuse me. But I will be honest with you. I will be totally frank with you. Do Yahweh recognize all the marriages that happen in captivity? No, he does not. And let me show you this in the book of Nehemiah. And we're going to read Nehemiah. Okay. And we're going to get to all your questions as best as we can. Let me answer this question. And this is in the book of Nehemiah. And let's read it in the book of Ezra. In the book of Ezra. And this was a great thing that happened with the various marriages. And it's in Ezra, the 9th chapter. This is what it says in Ezra, the 9th chapter, the 1st verse. Now, when these things were done, the princes came to me, saying, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites, so it wasn't just the priests and the Levites, it was the people too, have not separated themselves from the people of the lands, doing according to their abominations, even the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. For they have taken of their daughters for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy seed have mingled themselves with people of those lands. Yes, the hand of the princes and rulers have been chief in this trespass. And to make a long story short, you want to read this 9th chapter, this whole 9th chapter. And let me tell you the end of the matter. They were told that they had to separate themselves from these foreign wives. And they did so. Because there's many marriages, unfortunately, has happened that Yahweh is not pleased with. This is one of the reasons why Yahweh destroyed the earth by flood. Not just because of the abominations that took place in the evil imaginations, but also the mixed marriages. And we'll get more into that later. Yes, ma'am. The question was asked, did we live in the wilderness? We lived in the wilderness according to the book of Numbers, the 14th chapter, for 40 years. For 40 years. Yahweh will have us to live in a wilderness. This is one of the reasons why we keep the Feast of Tabernacles. We don't keep it in America because Yahweh said the only place that we can keep it is in a place that he chose to place his name. But we kept it to commemorate, or one of the reasons we kept it is to commemorate the fact that we stayed in booths in the wilderness. So yes, we did live there for 40 years. And let me say, the wilderness is the desert. This was no place like in Africa where they was among the forests. No, this was the desert. Yes, ma'am. And you can read that in the book of Numbers, the 14th chapter. All right, hallelujah. Question was asked, can I describe the return of King David? Will he return with his family? Is this considered reincarnation? And will we see our own family members? Well, as far as seeing our own family members, this is what the Creator said concerning the righteous in the book of Daniel. And then I would deal with David. Daniel, the 12th chapter. The very first couple verses. And at that time shall Michael stand up. The great prince was the first verse. The great prince which stands for the children of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And this Michael or Michael, this great prince, is no earthly man that's over some type of government or a king or prince of our people. This Michael, he is a prince of our people, but he's an angel. He's an angel. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book. Now, it's not talking about our people being delivered from captivity. This is what a lot of people think. It says, your people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in a book. And what book is it speaking about? The book of life. Yes, there is a book that Yahweh has before him that have the name of the people that will have everlasting life. And so Yahweh is not talking about delivered from captivity. He's talking about delivered from death. Watch what it says. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. And watch what it says. Some to everlasting life. Some to shame and everlasting contempt. And some people ask me, why do it say some? Because some is not written in the book. That's before Yahweh. So they won't be raised at all. And if your family members are written in this book, and you're written in this book, you all will be reunited. You all will be together once again. But if not, well, you know the answer. And as far as David returned, and anybody return, the only thing you can do, the only description Yahweh gives in anyone's return, and particularly David returned, a couple signs, because I can't go over all the various signs, But one of the signs that Yahweh said he will give in David's return, Jeremiah 23. And when it talk about David's return, it's talking about him, but it's not talking about his family, his sons and daughters and everybody. It's talking about his return. If they part of that righteous remnant that we just read about in the book of Daniel, the 12th chapter. And why? Because all them, they dead. His family members are dead. He himself died. So there has to be a return. And no, this return is not reincarnation, where a reincarnation, from my understanding, is you come back as something else. You left here a man, but you can come back something else. And no, he's going to come back to who he was. When they talk about Job coming back, he come back to who he was. When they talk about Moses and Abraham and Jacob and all them standing in their lot, they come back to who they used to be. They're not coming back as anything else but who they are. And it says in the book of Jeremiah, the 23rd chapter, behold, the 5th verse. The days come, says Yahweh, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. And we know who this king is, David. All through the scriptures, it says David is that king. David is that shepherd. David is that prince. David is that leader, that commander, that witness. And watch the 6th verse, because the 6th verse is the key. It says, in his days, talking about this king, Yehudah shall be saved, and Israel shall dwell safely. And this is the name whereby he shall be called, Yahweh our righteousness. In other words, you will see your king in the same time you will see the deliverance of the children of Israel, the children of Yehudah, in which, according to the scriptures, Yehudah shall be saved first. And it's understandably why, because David is a Yehudahite. And of course, there's other things I can show you about him, but that's the main thing that you want to know about his return, because it has everything to do with your deliverance. Yes, ma'am. The question was asked, does the number 13 represents rebelliousness and lawlessness? And no, it don't. Every number in the scriptures have something good and also bad. Let me show you this in the book of Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter. Oftentimes in the world of Babylon, you will see this 13, the number 13, used in a very wicked way. And why do you see it used in a wicked way? Because of wicked people. they're not going to use it in a righteous way because they're not righteous at all. So to them, any number will be bad, but the number 13 for them, Friday the 13th, what do that represent? Some masked man going around killing people for no reason at all. People ain't did nothing to him. And he going around killing people. The original people that set up the land that we know of called America, there was 13 colonies, 13 different places that signed onto the original Constitution of America, 13 colonies. And these people were wicked. There's a book called The 13th Tribe. And they talking about, again, some wicked people. And I can just go on and on and on about this 13. But every number, like the number 1, it represents light. That's what Yahweh did on the first day. Let there be light, and there was light. And Yahweh saw the light that it was good. But what is the opposite of light? Darkness. And darkness was there also. And when you read about this darkness, Yahweh said the way of the wicked is darkness. So if the way of the light is righteousness, the way of the wicked is darkness. And so everything has its opposite. And this is what it says in Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, the 1st verse. To everything there's a season, and to a time to every purpose, and there's a time to every purpose under the heaven. And so you got to put purpose behind time. What is the purpose of 1? Light. But what is the opposite of light? Darkness. What is the purpose of 2? Yahweh's name. But what is the opposite of having a Yahweh name? Hell and those and idolatry. Why you think commandment number 2 talk about don't bow to nothing, don't worship to nothing, don't make any graven images or any likeness in heaven above or earth beneath or waters under the earth? Because there's a dark side to everything. And there's some good to 13. Just like there's some bad to 13. 2nd verse, a time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. Time to mourn and a time to dance. And this is the problem. Our people just don't know time. And so they get all these times mixed up. But there's some good to 13, and one day I'll show you that. But there's also some bad. And I'll show you that. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, according to the scriptures, a question was asked. What is the word of Yahweh concerning the mentioning of other deities? Of course, we got a law in the book of Exodus 23. And this is what it says. In the 13th verse. Exodus 23 and 13. And in all things that I've said to you, be circumspect. In other words, be very, very means you want to make sure you done exhaust every avenue not to do this. You want to make sure that you done circle the whole wagon and make sure that there's nothing in you that would defile this law. In all things that I've said to you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of other Elohims or idols, or because there's no Elohim but Yahweh. So these other images and idol, because they will have to be some type of idol or image. And then it says, don't mention their names, neither let it be heard out of your mouth. Therefore, you have people who will say, well, I don't say the days of the week. That's why they were. You might hear people say MON day or TUE day or THUR day. And in truth, these were not the total names of these deities by no stretch of the imagination. And to be just totally frank and honest with you, just about all the words in an American lexicon come from some type of Greek worship. All you had to do is, they got a book called the Book of Gods, Book of Deities. And I think it's called Book of Deities, DEITY. Apostrophe S. And this book will have all the things that our people are really saying every day. Many of their names are the names of deities. Even though this is a law, in the book of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, or Azariah, all were given Babylonian names. These Babylonian names that they were given was names of Babylonian gods. And our people say these names all the time. And y'all know what they are. And I may add, that's what the people called them in Babylon. Now, did they sin? No, these names were placed on them. Just like many of the names that we were raised with were placed on us. So, wisdom is the principal thing, but with all that getting, get understanding. And a lot of these names that our people attribute, they are derived from these false idols, many of them. But they not totally the name. But either way it goes, make no mention of the name of these deities. This is a law. And neither let it be heard out of your mouth. Yes, ma'am. Praise Mighty Yah, Shalom. The question was, according to the 400-year captivity, do we go by a 365-year calendar, which we know there's no 365 days in a year? And some people will even have 380 days in a year because they will have 13 months or 384 days. It's not even 365, let alone 384 days in a year. Now, how do I know it's not 365 days in a year? Because then that would mean that Yahweh will have months that's 31 days. And there's 7 31-day months in the American calendar or the Greek or the Gregorian calendar. And we know there is no such thing as a 31-day month. It's totally fake and fictitious, even though this is what our people go by. According to the scriptures, period. There is no other scriptures that would suggest anything else that is 12 months in a year. And every month is mentioned in the scripture from the first month to the 12th month, more than one time. No other month is mentioned. The only type of month is mentioned in the scriptures is a 30-day month, period. And there is no other type of month mentioned in the scriptures, period. And 12 times 30 is 360 days. And a lot of people, because they don't understand how these 360 days actually work and operate, they will rather dismiss Yahweh's word and then go by something that ain't even in the book at all. Even though Yahweh said don't add to his word and don't take away his word, they will do that just because they don't understand how these 12 months and 30 days work, which is the only things mentioned in the scriptures, period. But since that is the case, the question is asked, these 400 years, do you go by a 360-day calendar or do you go by a 365-day calendar, which undoubtedly is a difference? The person who asked the question said there seemed to be a 3.5 year difference. And I haven't searched that out yet. So to this particular person, let me search it out and I will get back to you to let you know. Hallelujah. And I may add, we do go by 360 days, period. No matter what the Gregorian calendar says, because that's all it is anyway. So any other years is just fake. It's fictitious. It's just made up. It's just made up. But I will search that out nevertheless. Yes, okay. In the book of Nehemiah, the 8th chapter, a statement was made that we kept Sukkot with Joshua, according to the book of Nehemiah, the 8th chapter, and we're going there, we kept Sukkot with Joshua. So why couldn't we keep it today? And this is before Jerusalem was established. And let's see if your facts is correct. In the book of Nehemiah, the 8th chapter, the 13th verse, and this is what it says. Make sure I have it right. Nehemiah 8. Okay, here we go. 13th verse. And on the second day were gathered together the chief or the fathers of all the people, the priests, the Levites, unto Ezra the scribe, even to understand the words of the law. And they found written in the law, which Yahweh had commanded by Moses, that his children of Israel should dwell in booths in the feast of the 7th month, and that they should publish and proclaim in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, Go forth unto the mount, fetch olive branches, pine branches, myrtle branches, palm branches, and branches of thick trees, to make booths, as it is written. So the people went forth and brought them and made themselves booths, every one upon the roof of his house, and in their courts, and in the courts of the house of Elohim, and in the street of the water gate, and in the street of the gate of Ephraim, and all the congregation of them that had come again out of the captivity made booths and sat under the booths. For since the days of Joshua, or Yeshua, the son of Nun, to that day, had not the children of Israel done so. And there was very great gladness. Also day by day, from the first day to the last day, he read in the book of the law of Elohim, and they kept the feast 7 days. And on the 8th day was a solemn assembly according to the manner. So I'm assuming that the caller or the person who asked this question said they did this during the time of Joshua, before Jerusalem was established. And who do you think established Jerusalem? And let me show you when Jerusalem was established, according to the book of Joshua. But I will agree with this caller that when they did keep, two things I want to make note. In the book of Nehemiah, the 8th chapter, when they kept Sukkot, number one, they have to agree that when they kept it, according to the 17th verse, and all the congregation of them that had come again out of the captivity made booths and sat under the booths. So these were people who came out of captivity. These was not like our people today who's in captivity making booths and sat under them. And there are no scriptures where our people made booths and celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles in captivity. That's number one, that they should recognize that this is plainly making that fact truth. And then the second thing that it says in the 16th verse of the same thing, at the 15th verse, it says, and they shall publish and proclaim in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, go forth to the mount. And they got all these trees as it was written according to the law. So the people went forth, brought them, made themselves boot, every one upon the roof of his house, and in their courts of the house of Elohim, and in the street of the water gate, and in the street of the gate of Ephraim. And so this is what it appears to me, that even though some of these places were not in the location of Jerusalem, they still made booths all over. That's what it looked like to me. And who made these booths? Those who came out of the captivity, who kept the Feast of Tabernacles. But what if you were still in captivity? What if you still, as many of our people was during this time, during the time of Nehemiah, when Nehemiah returned, everybody didn't return with him. As a matter of fact, when Ezra returned, Nehemiah had not even returned yet. So many of our people were still in captivity, and they did not keep the feast. And why? Because they knew they had to keep it in a place where Yahweh chose to place his name. Now, during the time of Joshua, in the book of Joshua, and let us turn there, the 14th chapter. This is what it says. In the book of Joshua, the 14th chapter, watch what it says in the first verse. And these are the countries which the children of Israel inherited in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun, the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel, distributed for inheritance to them. In other words, the two that actually divided the land up for the people was Joshua and the high priest Eleazar. Watch what it says. By lot was their inheritance, as Yahweh commanded by the hand of Moshe, for the 9 tribes and for the half tribe. For Moses had given the inheritance of 2 tribes and a half tribe on the other side of Jordan, but the Levites he gave no inheritance among them. For the children of Joseph were 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. Therefore they gave no part to the Levites in the land except the cities to dwell in, with their suburbs for their cattle and for their substance. So they had divided this up. They had their land. But watch what it happens in starting at the 5th verse. As Yahweh commanded Moses, so the children of Israel did, and they divided the land. Then the children of Yehudah came to Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite said to him, you know the thing that Yahweh said to Moshe, the man of Elohim, concerning me and you in Kadesh Barnea. 40 years old was I when Moses, the servant of Yahweh, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again as it was written in my heart. As it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren that went up with me made the heart of the people melt. But I wholly followed Yahweh my Elohim. And Moshe swore on that day, saying, surely the land whereon your feet have trodden shall be your inheritance, and your children's forever, because you have wholly followed Yahweh my Elohim. And now, behold, Yahweh has kept me alive, as he said, these 40 and 5 years, even since Yahweh spoke this word to Moshe, while the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness, and now, lo, I am this day 85 years old. As yet I am as strong this day as I was in the day that Moses sent me. As my strength was then, even so is my strength now for war, both to go out and come in. Now therefore give me this mountain, whereof Yahweh spoke in that day. For you heard in that day how the Anakims were there, and that the cities were great and fenced. If so be Yahweh will be with me, then I shall be able to drive them out, as Yahweh said. And Joshua blessed him, and gave to Caleb the son of Jephunneh Hebron for an inheritance. Hebron therefore became the inheritance of Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite unto this day, because he wholly followed Yahweh Elohim of Israel. And the name of Hebron before was Kirjabat, which Arba was a great man of the Anakims, and the land had rest from war. In other words, what this is letting us know, that during the time of Joshua, that one of the last places that was established was the land of Yehudah, and by Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. And Hebron is where King David ruled. He ruled there 7 years. And he ruled in Jerusalem 33 years. And once Yehudah, or Caleb, who was a Yehudahite, established Hebron, then they established what we know of as Jerusalem. And this happened during the life of Joshua. This is where Yahweh chose to place his name. Yehudah is part of what we know of as Jerusalem. Why do you think the kings of Yehudah ruled the land? So I see Nehemiah 8 consistent with the law of Yahweh during the time of Joshua. This is when this land was established. Unless there's something else you can see that shows that it was not established during the time of Joshua. As a matter of fact, there is no land, no inheritance that Joshua didn't establish before he died. The whole inheritance was given out, and everything was established for all the 12 tribes of Israel, including Manasseh and Ephraim, which is not part of the 12 tribes of Israel. We have 2 more questions. If they're not long, we're going to answer them, even though we're beyond our time. And so the question is asked in Job 2 and 23. They want to know what that is referring to, and is that prophecy? And I'll look at it real quick. And what's the other question? All right, let me look at Job 2. Last question. Oh, Joel. Oh, Joel 2. Okay, in 23 and 24. Is that correct? All right, Joel. Both is in the 2nd chapter, verse 23 and 24. Okay, all right. And let's see that real quick. And listen, we're going to be answering questions all week. So pile your questions up. Joel. can find it, I'll try to answer it. Okay, I'm too far. All right. I'm close. There we go. Joel 2. And this is what it says in verse 23. Be glad then, you children of Zion, and rejoice in Yahweh your Elohim, for he has given you the former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first. And the word month is just added. And the question was asked, is this referring to what? A prophet? And the answer is yes, it is. I know a lot of people just think it's rain, but no, it's what Yahweh is providing for you in a way that a lot of people don't understand. And the person who's asking the question, is this referring to a prophet? And yes, it is. And I don't have time to break it down right now, but I will do so. And then the 24th verse says, and the floors shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. And what was the question about that? All right. In other words, it says, and the floor shall be full of wheat, and the vat shall overflow with new wine and oil. In other words, as a result of this rain, the floor shall be full of wheat, the vats overflow with new wine and oil. In other words, is this the result of the blessing that we will see as a result of this former rain and this latter rain? And yes, it is. Of course, it will continue on talking about this great blessing. And we will explain this. We will come back to Joel 2, and we will explain exactly what this is saying. Because it is prophecy, and it is talking about a prophet. So until tomorrow, Yahweh love you, and so do I. Shalom.
Times, yes. Oh, Fourth Tribe Entertainment. It's gonna be a new day. It's gonna be a new way. You must think that you're our king. Yehuda Dean, Fourth Tribe ENT. It's gonna be a new day. It's the beginning of a new way. You could never be our king. Yehuda Dean, rep Yah with me. It's the dawn of 400 years. 400 years since we shed our first tears. 400 years since my ancestors slain. 400 years since we all knew his name. 400 in this land, Babylon, the bases of many kings. Yah's name is gone. We are the mighty Yehuda Dean. Lions of Yah, praise Yah with me. The righteous, Yah, the holy, Yah, the creator, Yah, the only, Yah, the righteous, Yah, the holy, Yah, the creator, Yah, the only, Yah. He is our king, our savior, and our judge, Yehuda Dean. Yahweh is righteous. He is our king, our savior, and our judge, Yehuda Dean. Yahweh is righteous. the creator, the